Okay, that's me.
Can we put ourselves on mute then until?
Right. Here's me again. Sorry, back to me. And again. Okay, brilliant. Grand. So you're going to count down from, or you'll give us the cue to count down. So hello, I'm Beulah. I'm a mediator in Science Gallery Dublin. So tonight's panel is a third in the series of online activations by Science Gallery Dublin for the current exhibition, Invisible. Invisible investigates fundamental physics and the quest for human knowledge, but it also looks at those who work in science and how their work can sometimes be underrepresented. It originated as dark matter, which showed in London in 2019, and that is also where the film Dark Matter was developed. I'm happy to be here today with the director of the film, Adeyemi Michael, and actress and scientist Laura Pieters. So before we kick off the questions, I'll let you two introduce yourselves, maybe starting with Laura.
Okay, hello, yeah, my name's Laura Joy Pieters, and I studied chemistry, and then I became a young leader at Science Gallery London at the same time as doing more performing, and they really helped to sort of nurture those interests and help me pursue more acting opportunities. And so with this film, I got to act in it as well as use my sort of science background.
Okay. Yep, so we had a slight audio issue, but I'm Beulah. I'm a mediator in Science Gallery Dublin. This panel is the third in a series of online activations by Science Gallery Dublin for the current exhibition Invisible. So Invisible investigates fundamental physics and the quest for human knowledge, but it also looks at those who work in science and how their work can sometimes be underrepresented. It originated as Dark Matter in Science Gallery London, which showed in 2019, and that is where the film Dark Matter was developed. This evening, we're here with the director of the film, Adeyemi Michael, and actress and scientist, Laura Joy Pieters. So I will let you two introduce yourselves again. We'll start with you, Laura.
Thank you. Hello again. So my name is Laura, and I studied chemistry at university, and then I became a young leader at Science Gallery London, and they really helped to nurture like all of our interests creatively as well. So I started performing around that time, and then they were really supportive in this idea I had for making a short film around dark matter, which I had the opportunity to perform in as well.
Great. Adeyemi, could you introduce yourself as well, please?
Cool. Thanks, Beulah. So I'm Adeyemi Michael, filmmaker who's commissioned to make the film. What can I say about myself? I'm a filmmaker. I usually make sort of documentaries as well as sort of fictional films that sort of look at the Afro-Caribbean experience specifically and particularly in terms of trying to tell stories that are against the grain and sort of challenge the sort of colonial narratives that are typically told. So yeah, that's who I am.
That's great. So to kick off the questions, we can start with you, Laura. So could you tell us a bit more about what inspired you to feature in a film like this, or what it was about the theme Dark Matter in particular?
Sure, yeah. So when I found out that Science Gallery in London would be doing a Dark Matter season, I was really excited because of my hard science background. So I had more sort of knowledge about physics and chemistry rather than life sciences. So I thought maybe I could work on some projects and things like that. And it happened that we got a new community engagement manager at the gallery in the new year of 2018, Esther, and she encouraged us all to like write down some goals of things that we wanted to achieve that year. And I really wanted to sort of create a short film or be involved in the making of a short film. And it became a reality. So I really liked the idea of women in STEM or women in traditionally male-dominated subjects, and being able to say that, you know, women, especially women of colour, do a lot of important work in those fields as well. So at the time, I didn't really know what sort of shape or form the film would take. And, you know, like how it turned out in the end, that's Adeyemi's sort of brilliant visual and creative ideas. But yeah, I think the whole sense of like the metaphors you can draw out between dark matter, invisibility, and underrepresentation as women of colour sort of really, I don't know, it just like sounded really nice, and I thought that something great came out of it.
So it was those experiences as well as the Young Leaders program as well. And then Adeyemi, you came in. Could you guys tell us a bit more about how the original idea developed after or while you collaborated on the film?
Yeah, so I think we sent a sort of very not too detailed brief to some filmmakers, and Adeyemi's idea of having like a young woman of colour sort of embody the spirit of Vera Rubin sounded really nice. And Vera Rubin was the scientist who first discovered concrete evidence of dark matter, and she was working in an incredibly male-dominated field, and for a long time didn't receive the same amount of acknowledgement of her male peers. But she discovered this thing, and it's an incredibly huge discovery. We still don't know what dark matter is, but we know it's there. We've got concrete evidence that something is out there. Yeah, so she's really important to the film. And Adeyemi, I suppose you could talk about your process.
Yeah, I guess, you know, when the idea was presented, science isn't my background, you know, filmmaking is. So having heard sort of what Laura and the Young Leaders wanted to do around presenting a narrative of Black women specifically in STEM, but then a sort of mixture between trying to figure out how to show dark matter, something that we can't quantify and something that is not visible to sort of the naked eye, just led me to really think about, okay, how could we also say something? Because my work is usually around, or when I work on films, is usually trying to say something of impact, something that is a sort of some social impact, and makes a statement about the world that we live in. And so I was like, okay, well, this Vera Rubin woman sounds very interesting. Why don't we use the spirit of Vera Rubin with many other things to sort of like tell the story of dark matter? So ideally, I actually quizzed. Initially, I sent in a completely different idea than the one we ended up with. The idea we ended up with was something that came out of a conversation that I needed to have with Laura around, you know, her being born in a bedroom in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Which sounds very sort of like out there, but I came up with a rationale that made sense to me and hopefully everyone else that was involved in the project, to talk about this idea that we are all born into dark matter. Some of us see it, and some of us recognize it, and some of us don't. And that metaphorically, that dark matter is Blackness, and what that means, you know, especially from a sort of social standpoint. When you think about what it means to be Afro-Caribbean in society, whether it be in STEM or elsewhere. So yeah, I guess the idea sort of shaped from that conversation that Laura and I had about her being born to a Black woman nonetheless, and I sort of imparted certain things around the Eve genome, this idea that, you know, the first sign of life and birth is through that of a Black woman. And so, and yes, there are elements of rebirth within it. There are other sort of tangential things that are in there as well, and codes within the work. Like when you see the Black women stood around a bed, they also represent that dark matter that is around the room that not everyone else can see, but like they're present in a way. And so yeah, and the number 8 being that of infinity, you know, Vera Rubin dying at age 88. There are many things that I was trying to weave in there that are sort of coded, that are kind of unexplained. And so, yeah, through that, the work was born, I guess.
Yeah. I really like how you, I like how you summed up all those metaphors. Sorry, I lost you there for a second. Yeah. Could we actually go back to what you were saying about exploring Afro-Caribbean narratives? You spoke a bit about a particular scene in the film where Laura's surrounded by all her family and friends, and it seems like you use those themes a lot. So there's a lot of culture and community and family reoccurring in your work. Can you tell us a bit more about how you also use genre as a filmmaker, as a tool as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's funny enough, I think sometimes in your work, there are things that repeat that you don't realize. I mean, that's the first time I've thought of that scene as that, because those 8 women, the majority of them are scientists, if I'm right in saying so. We get about five scientists who actually work in the field. And in some way, yes, that's an element of community. But yeah, that sort of witnessing and cherishing, like for example, in the final scene, you see in the film, you see the women they carry Laura after her rebirth scene, to the top of a building, which is kind of like this, I would say, sort of spiritual moment of unveiling her to the world and unveiling her that this is the world that, you know, is in front of her. And yeah, the element of celebration in there as well. So, I mean, these are things that are, I guess, yeah, they're reoccurring, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not unintentionally.
That is really...
And in genre, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny in terms of genre. It's difficult. It's difficult to say because this is sci-fi, but those women are real. Laura herself is real. Represents what Vera Rubin, but you know what sort of dark matter is essentially in terms of my construct in the film. So so yeah, it's difficult to say. I guess it's categorized as such, but like, you know, everyone in the film they're not actors. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a real story.
Yeah.
So in the film as well, you were talking about sci-fi there as genre. We have those aesthetic links. We have some pictures as well sent in by one of the other young mediators, Richard. So we have all those aesthetic links. We have the underwater scene. We have all these cosmic scenes. Laura, could you tell us a bit how you kind of engaged with science fiction in that aesthetic and theoretical way? Maybe you could tell us about how those concepts sort of connect with your experience as a Black woman in STEM.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's actually really interesting to point out, like to note that like everything Adeyemi is saying about dark matter is such a novel way of looking at it. Like as a scientist studying it, if you work with artists, you're forced to have a dialogue with them and consider it in an entirely different way. And I think that's really nice and like just opens your mind to all these themes and ideas. And I think that's really beautifully shot in the film because you have this like gorgeous visual imagery, which you might not instantly associate with physics or any hard science like astronomy. So I think that sci-fi is really important as like an offshoot from science, just like science communication, and how you can talk about science in art forms and not have it just as one type of person can talk about this, and so that it's accessible to everyone. So I've always been into sci-fi in a big way. And films like The Matrix and Alien and things like that, very much into. But I do really love sci-fi when it touches upon something about the human condition, like where we're from, where we're going. And I think it's really important that works of science fiction do have sort of women of color and people of color represented in it. And so in those images, you've got, you know, the black woman giving birth, and that's my gorgeous auntie who agreed to be in the film, Nadine. So grateful that she did. And another one of my aunties is a scientist, and she was in the film as well. And having those images distill like a human experience in a novel way, I think is really beautiful. Like the underwater scene is saying about like this place before birth, and it's like how do you visualize that? And you can do that in a sort of fantasy sci-fi realm and have it mean something. Same with the women carrying the stretcher up onto the rooftop. Like that's not something you'd see in real life, but it's such a beautiful image, and if it speaks to you, then that's wonderful, because it conveys all these really important messages that Adeyemi was talking about.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. So while the film was being made, during the Young Leader program, you were on the gallery floor a lot, I assume.
Yes. Yeah.
So while you were kind of coming up with the ideas of the film, did any optics from the Dark Matter exhibition actually end up reappearing in the film?
So I mean, I spoke to Adeyemi about the film a lot, but the ideas came from him, I have to say. But there are some brilliant parallels between what was on the exhibition in London and what appeared in the film. There was a really great piece called A Children's History of Invisibility, which visitors really liked, and that was by a Bahamian artist, and it was all about the nature of truth and history and what's recorded in history. And ultimately you have to remember that it's a human decision what's decided that to be recorded in history. Like one person or several historians decide what's important, decide what's going to be recorded and what's going to be forgotten, and how that's perceived by people today. And so it's important to remember that there's all sorts of stories that haven't been allowed to be told or haven't really been given their sort of due diligence, I suppose. So that piece was really interesting about the nature of truth. And I think it ties in with the film, because the film is like a fantasy retelling of Vera Rubin and Dark Matter. And it's really nice because Dark Matter was actually discovered by a woman and Vera Rubin was a white woman, but having it sort of portrayed with these sort of black narratives and things like that, and then putting it out in the world, which I think is important about art. It's showing people that this is also possible. So it's like showing people and like putting it out there with the rest of culture and things like that, so that maybe, you know, this might sound a bit extreme, but like historians can see, oh, you know, like this also happened type thing.
Yeah, I like that, the overlapping of stories. In the film, there's this sort of voiceover effect as well, and I understand that that is Vera Rubin's voice. Could you tell us a bit more about how that idea came in, or where the voice was taken from in the script? Maybe Adeyemi, if you would like to.
Cool. Sorry, my bad. So Vera's voice. That came from just trying to figure out how to insert Vera into the film. Because initially, you know, we were looking at archive material to include sort of video archive of Vera alongside the images of the Black women you see. But then there was something about the flow and the pace. And then I was like, okay, well, what if, because of this of channeling the spirit of Vera Rubin, what if it was that they spoke her words? but mimed her words and we heard her. So it is the voice of Vera Rubin from a documentary that we had found called it's called The Astronomers. Where's the Rest of the Universe? And there's sort of like two main segments in that doc, and it was just like what she was saying just rang true. I mean, there was a lot of other sort of archive that we looked at, but hearing her voice was important to sort of summon her spirit within the film to a degree. I think if it was the voice of the people that we see, and it was a worry for me because yes, Vera Rubin is who she is, but nonetheless she's a woman, right? And she's the person who discovered this. So to give her that respect and presence, it was really important for the film, I think. And so yeah, that's how that was born. I think the parts that we selected and chose were also specific as well, because we didn't want to sort of drown everyone in the complexities of trying to understand how dark matter exists. This is just sort of an abstract, understanding of dark matter, and trying to see where the sort of the overlap is, because the images you see and what you hear, if you think about it in sort of scientific terms, they're kind of worlds apart, right? So yeah, that's just how it came about.
Yeah, I think as well, it's really nice to have Vera Rubin's words sort of spoken by another generation, because for like her entire life, up until she died, Vera Rubin was really, really pioneering like women and people, like underrepresented people, to get into STEM. And she gave so many talks to like young people in schools and, like little kids and lots of women and girls. And she really, really like gave a massive push to that. So I think it's really nice to have that sort of reflected in the film as well.
Yeah, sorry to cut you, Beulah. That's a good point, because in the doc, that was one of the reasons I chose elements from this archive, because of that, because I saw images of young Black girls, young Black boys that she was mentoring back then, and just all of that was also made sense to sort of make sure that her voice was at the center of the film.
Yeah. There is that really beautiful aspect of just rebirth and retelling, and the main theme as well, but also in the way that you've overlaid her story with yours. As well as that, Adeyemi, could you tell us a bit more about the significance of the underwater scene? I think we have a picture as well of Laura underwater. Oh, your mic isn't on yet. Adeyemi.
Sorry, my bad.
No
this is the uncle vibe sometimes. I end up doing uncle stuff. Yeah, so there are some pictures of Laura underwater. If we could get one of those pictures up, any of the underwater scene images. And so anyway, this water scene, the representation for me was just trying to, again, quantify what it means to be surrounded by something, surrounded by this concept of, not to say that water is dark matter, but what does having dark matter around you feel like? And then what does it mean to be born as well? So playing on those two things. But in the film, I'm playing with elements, such as water and fire, and just trying to, over between the meanings of those things. And have we got the images? Because I'm sure we do, right? Do you mind getting one of those images up? Have we got?
I'm sure Andy's able to get them up.
Andy.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry, I couldn't. I thought it was coming on our screen. I was about to say, so what? That's weird. Okay, thanks, Andy. And yeah, so I guess the water scene was really that. Apart from that, I mean, I don't know what else to say, but yeah, the water scene is really is like the jewel. And you know, before we shot the water scene, we had shot everything else before that. The water scene was supposed to be wasn't something that was in the initial project, but I knew there was something missing and we were going to add something, and then that was it, because it just kind of, it sort of like glues the whole film together,
Yeah.
essentially.
I like what
Yeah.
you've said about using the elements, and then there's this sort of like embryonic feel of Laura being underwater as well, which really links to the rebirth. Could you actually tell us a bit about the experience and like the logistics of how that was shot, Laura?
Yeah, so well, that scene was actually took some time to be shot, but we ended up thanks to the Science Gallery getting to shoot it in an amazing huge underwater tank. I don't know how deep it went, but they shot some Bond scenes in there and like other big films. That was really great. And luckily it was kept at 33 degrees the entire day that I was in it. So for me, it was a really fun experience. I remember that when we were making the film, I got a phone call from Adeyemi saying like, "How are you with the water?" Very cryptically, but I mean, I love the water, so it was fine. But yeah, I imagine it must have been quite hard to shoot. But essentially, I just had to hold my breath for, I don't know, 20 seconds at a time or something. So it was great for me, but I imagine that the shooting was rewarding, but interesting.
The end result was really...
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that scene is just that I feel like it's important when you make films to always do something that you might have never done before. And that was something we hadn't done before. And so we were trying to push the boundary and push what we're doing cinematically as well. So I feel like it's great, that feeling that, you know, Laura's just said that, you know, she can say that she shot a scene in a tank where they shoot Bond and the way they've shot Bond, you know, it's like, there's like a sort of minor victory there for us in some kind of way. Not that everyone's going to know that, but like, it's in terms of pushing the craft forward and what we're doing, and the experience as well. You know, I'm not sure, Laura, you can speak to this, but I don't know, you know, your experience with being in film before, how is that for you? You know, how is that being on that type of set where, you know, you guys were included as well, from being in front of the screen to being behind the camera as well. So, you know, how was it for you? What did you, sorry to ask that question, but I think it's important for you to say.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the whole experience was brilliant from that perspective, because I learned so much. The only other sort of film sets I've been on before was purely as an actor, which is obviously still great fun, but being involved creatively and like being asked your opinion and knowing that it's like your baby that you're making, metaphorically, it's just like an entirely different experience. It was really, really nice. So it was probably twofold for me, because firstly, we had loads of us young leaders involved. So from like the planning, very early stages when we didn't know what the film was going to be, there was 8 of us young leaders, and everyone really helped me to like give me the confidence to actually go ahead with it and give the idea. One of us is a filmmaker, Bella. She was invaluable. Richard, like you've already mentioned, is a photographer, so he was shooting behind the scenes shots on set, and like Daryl was creative, was shadowing, things like that. So it was a really nice like sort of group experience, and hopefully a learning curve for everyone. But the second one was having lots of my family on set, which was really nice. Obviously, I wanted to make sure that they were okay at all times, so a little bit stressful. But my dad's in the film, 2 of my aunties are in the film. My mum, who is wonderful, was also on set to support. So that was really nice, and it felt like I had a huge personal stake in the project. So yeah, it was completely different experience, and I hope I can do something like that again one day. But it's nice to work with someone like Adeyemi, who is a filmmaker. Like, we wanted someone who wasn't just like a director who you'd give a script to and they would, you know, go through the motions. Like Adeyemi and his process of making it and involving us young leaders and my experiences in the film ended up making a film which, you know, I could never have imagined that it would be that weird and wonderful. So that's a really great experience.
Weird and wonderful. Exactly it. So I think you mentioned this earlier, Adeyemi. There's this the ending scene where Laura is brought up to the top of a building and there's a sunset in the background. Could you go back to that and tell us kind of about how that pulls it
I
all
think
together?
before I go back to that, I'm just going to say, I think it's really important what Laura just said about her family.
Yeah.
It's important making films, especially filmmakers of Afro-Caribbean heritage, that we take pride in our families and our stories and the power of the story, because we are a living archive. And if we don't archive ourselves in this way, where will we be? I think it goes back to what Laura was saying about just about telling history. One day people will talk about that this was done, and they will see your family and they will see you. And I think that's actually really important. And in terms of the film, the final scene in the film, yeah, I mean, this is just sort of like, you know, it's a statement. It was really about the statement for me. It was about the words, because if you remember, it's the only words that are spoken by Laura or by anyone in the film. And I think it needed to be there to punctuate and give a level of authority to the women who are in the film. Because although you hear Vera's voice, I feel like what Laura ends up saying, you know, the fact that 95% of the universe is Black, like this idea, like, yeah, I mean, that's what that scene was about to me. Yes, it's also about looking out into the future for sure, because you see her in this sort of way, and that sort of angle, at that angle. But I think it's really about the statement. It's about the words in that moment, and her becoming alive to her power, to herself being seen as dark matter, being recognized, and being flanked by those women who also recognize her too and are reflecting her energy. They hold the mirror up, sort of, you know, looking at her, trying to sort of gather this this energy that has come through her birth, her rebirth of understanding who she is and that she is recognized. And so yeah, that's what that scene is for me. And that's what it's about. I don't know how it was read, but yeah, it's one of those films that I feel like some of the codes in it. What did you think when you watched it, Beulah?
Sorry,
How did
could
you
you
feel?
repeat that? I lost your connection.
What did you feel? What did you think when you watched the film? That scene anyway.
So I think something that sort of maybe linked or came to me while I was watching it, I was thinking about the idea of Afrofuturism. And I know that's not necessarily a tool that you might have used, but it's sort of, I don't know, this idea of maybe reimagining a narrative where there isn't one is what I saw in that as well. So I really liked it. And then the final sentence was really poignant as well. And then I saw earlier on in an interview, Laura said something about being born into dark matter, and it all just clicked together.
Cool.
Yeah, but yeah.
Sorry to to ask you and put you on the spotlight. I think it's important to hear about the film, because we're talking, but the film hasn't been screened and we can't see it. So it's really important.
I think I've gained definitely a lot more insight, and I'm sure viewers have as well with you describing it. And because there's just like, there's an initial meaning that maybe I might connect with as a Black woman as well, but then there are all these other layers as well. Like if we hadn't talked to Laura, I wouldn't know that your family was involved. So there's just so much that has come from learning about it as well that just enhances it. But I'm going to see if we have any questions coming in. I think that might be the final one. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, Any last thoughts or words?
Any last thoughts? I don't know. I just want to just, I think it was really good to be part of this experience and share what we shared together by, I guess, archiving Laura's family and involving the young leaders and, making this project together in collaboration. It's something I've always done. I've been working, with young people for a long time, for over 10 years, 15 years almost actually. And so it's just nice to see just what we've managed to do and produce together with everyone involved and what can be done. But also it's important to shout the people out because Corinne, who commissioned the film, Corinne Orton, right? Orton, last name, Orton? Yeah. I think that's her last name. Corinne she was great in understanding because, when you come at these types of things as a filmmaker especially into an institution, there is a segue in terms of how things are transitioned, and language is completely different. So she was the buffer between that, and she did a really great job. And again, Laura and her family. So we got to give a massive big up to her and her family for being brave enough to be on screen and put themselves in a film like this as well. So as well as all of the young leaders who were involved.
Yeah, definitely. Corinne helped make it what it was because she had lots of amazing experience working with filmmakers and making films, and I think she had seen your work before, Adeyemi. So it was really helpful to have someone like that on the team. But just really great that this is the first time the Science Gallery in London's done something like this. Because we've only just opened. We opened in September 2018. So I know that, unless they're lying, that the Science Gallery is so happy with what turned out and how experimental it was, and the risks that Adeyemi was willing to take, and also the fact that you can make it political, which I think is amazing. Like, it's not just saying something that's been said before. It's done in a new way, and so hopefully, the Science Gallery can do more things like this.
That's brilliant. So this has been a really, really great conversation. Thank you again to both of you for being here to facilitate it for us. I just have to say to any of the viewers, if anyone wants to keep up with any of the work from Invisible, you can go on to dublin.sciencegallery.com.
Thank you, Beulah.
No problem. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Laura. Cheers. We can just say bye, yeah? Great, thank you.
Oh, great.
Well done, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good job. I hope there weren't too many technical